Hi, everybody. Welcome to Next to Media. I'm Mike Shields. My guest this week is Mike Pollack, Managing Director of Digital Media Solutions at Epsilon. Hey, Mike. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike. Very happy to be here. Appreciate it.
So let's kind of take a state of affairs look at the digital advertising market, because there's still some big thorny questions hanging over the space as we head into the new year and all the big events coming up. The big one is, are we, even with cookies being delayed and Google maybe not be broken up, and all these things are happening, people worry that we're going to a logged in world only, where we're going to be reaching consumers with inherent limitations. Where do you see that?
Yeah, listen, I think there are some real challenges with identity or identifier deprecation that could lead to a conclusion that we're going to end up living in a logged in walled garden world. And I think the reality is that would create a ton of challenges. If we are only in a walled garden world, I know from talking to marketers, that's something they're concerned with.
They don't want that, right? That's not something that even though they love those big players and everything, they want options.
Yeah. Listen, it limits how we as marketers build relationships with our customers. It limits our view of the customer to, a more limited data set, limited understanding of who actually converted, ultimately limits us to having conversations with our customers in just those specific channels.
Right.
And also in a walled garden world, if I want to talk to my own customers, I'm usually limited to just uploading email addresses, and that as a currency is limiting. And there was a recent study, I think it was by the Harris poll, it was commissioned by OpenX, and found that American consumers spend nearly 2/3 of their time on the open web.
Right.
And so to me, it just underscores the importance of reaching customers outside of the
all
walled
that
garden.
demand that we're seeing fulfilled on the retail media networks and the portals and everything. That's happening because they're out there reading about stuff, learning stuff, learning about products. That there needs to be a way to capture that, right?
Yeah, I'm going to channel my inner Shark Tank here. There's got to be a better way.
Yes.
And so for us, the way that we think about it at Epsilon, if you don't want to be stuck inside only the walled gardens, the best way out is what we would refer to as having like one view, one vision, and one voice in how they communicate with customers and prospects. And I can unpack that if you want. So when I talk about one view, it's really, we know that many of the marketers we work with, you have a really strong understanding of their customer base, but it's limited, right? There's a lot they don't know. So if you're a retailer, you know what they're buying in their particular location, but not necessarily, everything else about that individual. And so we think it's really important for these brands to be able to augment this understanding with additional data. So at Epsilon, we've got a lot of data on those types of customers. We can provide deeper insights into their behaviors, preferences, and needs. But we can also go a step further by helping them understand more about the universe of potential customers, who they are, and how to engage them. And I think one of the challenges that we think about walled gardens too is, we're trying to reach these people outside of walled gardens, is you have to be able to have identity resolution that goes far beyond email. We talked about that with the walled garden challenge. Like, Mike, I know you ask the questions usually, but how many email addresses do you have?
I'm not a normal person, but I got a couple. I got a business one, a personal one. I probably have an old one I've forgotten about. My kids have ones now, so it's a little weird.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty typical. I've got a Gmail. Actually, I think I've got 2 Gmail addresses, one I don't use. I've got a Yahoo. I've got a email for work. I've got old work addresses.
Yeah.
So those need to be reconciled to a single individual or a single customer, not a device or an email. And so one of the things that Epsilon does to help solve for this and helps marketers have a single comprehensive view of the universe of potential buyers, but resolve back to real people for a marketer to talk to. And so if I kind of build out that view, vision, and voice, once we have that understanding and that strong comprehensive view of buyers and prospects, we can start to craft a vision of how to engage them. And so, it's important for brands to be able to help understand where, how often, where not to engage these individuals and how much to spend on them based on current and even projected value that they might have. And then one voice is really kind of where it gets paid off, where we can allow marketers to put a strong understanding of each individual consumer to work, leveraging AI powered media. And the result in that is that marketers can deliver not only a proverbial right message, right audience, right time, but also deliver a message that's relevant for each individual and leverage what they learn to ensure the next message is also really relevant across all different types of channels. And so, for us, so much of that power is lost when you're kind of just in the walled
Right.
garden route, because you just can't do that there.
So it's interesting. Made me think of this. You're taking this people-based approach, and you have all these different variables and pieces that you put together to identify people across the way. Does that mean is that an alternative to, because there are a bunch of alternative IDs that emerged the last couple of years to save us from the signal loss, right? Does that mean you don't need them? It's better to use your thing than their thing, or are they all going to kind of coexist and work together?
I mean, identity solutions are inherently very different, right? Because it's all based on the fidelity of the signal and what you're using.
Right.
And so, there are a lot of solutions that might use an email address or a third-party cookie or, limited information. Epsilon, our core ID is inherently different. We've got 9 different forms of identification tied to an individual. And so we're less reliant upon that, especially in all the changing landscape that we talked about.
If one thing goes or has changed, you're not hurt as like some other identifier might be. Okay, what does AI do to all this? The equation. It's still very early in our journey here, but and AI is definitely taking hold, and the platforms are using it a lot for their media optimization. There's a worry that on the open web it's going to wreck things, but I also think there's probably a way that it can probably help you connect better with people. What are you seeing there right now?
I think there's a massive opportunity. If you think about it, with identity, data, and AI all working together, there's an opportunity to answer complex challenges that the industry really hasn't been well equipped to address until now. The foundation, though, to do that is data, right? If you look at AI solutions that we use as consumers, whether it's like Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT, it's all based on crazy amounts of valuable data that train that model. In media, though, unfortunately, that doesn't happen that often, right? If you think about, we've all had this experience. I look for a t-shirt. I look at, I'm browsing a t-shirt online, and too often I'm then retargeted with ads for that same t-shirt over time, and then get discounts to try to get me to buy that t-shirt. It's just a bad consumer experience, especially if I've already bought it, right? Now I'm getting targeted with discounts that are lower than what I paid for it, versus the ability to actually ingest real-time data to know that I purchased that shirt, whether it's offline or online, and then use predictive signals to know about me and what actions I'm more likely to take, right? So whether it's pants or shoes, but something that's more relevant to me, that's, in my mind, a really good application of, how AI can be properly channeled.
And are you speaking theoretically, or is that something are you and others in your set going to build these predictive engines with your data and try and, compete? I don't say compete with what Facebook and Google are doing, but that kind of thing.
Yeah, we are already doing that, and that's, it's extending what maybe others are doing, again, in walled gardens, but being able to do that across open web with a fuller understanding of what we know about individuals, and then continuously getting smarter to be able to serve that right message.
What about how does that help you? Does it help you with that identity challenge we've been talking about? Or does it help you just tie together more pieces, or is it kind of an alternative to the going after the logged in world we've been talking about?
I look at it as more, I guess, maybe it's the alternative. I think it's more about getting back to right message, right time, but it's what is the next best action? What is it that I want to serve to somebody based on what we know about them? It's that predictive nature, but utilizing massive sets of data to make sure that we're delivering the most appropriate message or offer to an individual based on where they are in their purchasing journey.
Right. Are there only going to be so many big players that can compete on that kind of front? Like how many either on the buy side or the sell side how many companies can have like really robust amounts of data to train these predictive AI platforms the right way?
I think it's quite limited, because you need, going back to the first point, you need massive amounts of data, right? And so, Epsilon has been doing this for decades, and the amount of data we've been able to collect. But if you want to train models and be sophisticated, you need identity and you need data at the core. And so I think that does limit, how well it can be done.
Shifting gears a little bit, but it's related. There's been a lot of talk lately because of all this stuff that we're talking about. The worlds of ad tech and MarTech are maybe crashing into each other more than they have in the past. Is that true? Why is that? And what does that mean?
Yeah. I think they are coming together, because, I think about the MarTech side, it's around organization of identity, organization of data.
Right.
It's the tools that allow you to figure out what your customers are doing and how you want to speak to them. And then ad tech is how you pay it off, right? Ad tech is in how do you take the data, the segmentation, all the work that you've done, and ultimately go find them. And so, yeah, I do see those things continuously.
So those things used to be disconnected, but the importance of identity makes it really important for them to come together, I guess.
That's right. I mean, we actually just restructured, our sales organization. We historically have had 3 different divisions. We had a tech division, which is everything from data onboarding to CDPs and loyalty platforms and clean rooms. We had then a data division, and we had a digital division, which was activating media. We changed our entire sales organization and go to market because all these things work together. You couldn't have these all segmented out. It's about how do you solve real customer challenges, and the reality is you need all those pieces kind of humming together.
As that happens, are brands is everybody going to have to pick a standard identifier at some point? Does that mean, like, once you get those stacks together, do you have to pick one way of doing things, one partner, or how does that look?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just having this conversation with my colleague, and her point of view, and I agree with it, is I think the ad tech industry probably needs to shift its focus from picking a singular standard identifier to standardizing the concept of identity itself. And so as privacy laws evolve and consumer behavior changes, the industry is going to prioritize a unified understanding of identity and stop relying on traditional identifiers like cookies and place the emphasis on real verification and accuracy in ID solutions. And integrating transaction data with digital touchpoints will help us optimize and remove waste. But to answer your question, though, I don't think that there should be a standard identifier, but I think marketers need to pick a standard identifier, right? We've got our
for them, you mean?
For them. I mean, we have our core ID, which does everything I've mentioned. And we have found ways to make our identity portable, so it can be operable with other platforms, right? But I don't know. I provide a word of caution, I think, when it comes to even the word standardization. When I think of standardization, I think it means almost like the lowest common denominator solution.
Inherently limiting, right? Or boxing you in when in a business you don't want to be boxed in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think like the lowest the thing that often gets thrown out as it relates to a single identifier is email. And email is just not enough. It's right. We talked about it. It's not person-based. It has the challenges like we spoke about, right? Everyone's got multiple email addresses. And if they're not resolved to an individual, that's problematic. And so I think there's risk if you go down to just trying to get a single standard for the industry.
Yeah. And, not to go on a tangent, but you see this in television where there's a lot of excitement around CTV targeting, but you don't log into everything. Increasingly, a lot of people are using free services with no logins. There has to be some other way or other means of connecting those dots. What about, I just wonder, are there certain consumers they're just attracted to anonymity, or their habits by nature just they're not logged in all the place, or they make it harder for you in signal loss. Is that an issue for you and your clients?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is that there are people that are harder to reach, right?
Yeah.
Despite Google, what was it? And I guess it was just this past summer, right? Announcing that they're not going to be unilaterally removing third-party cookies from Chrome. Right. Signal loss is happening, right? And it's not just cookies. You've got unstable identifiers like IP addresses and device IDs that are becoming unreliable. And so, yeah, you have people that are harder to reach. You've got data degradation that happens over time, when a consumer clears their browser cache. And so, yeah, you've got people that are ultimately more difficult. I mean, another example would be Apple, right? There's no third-party cookies on Apple.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and so I think if you turn the page and focus on there are things you can do about it. I mean, Epsilon's person-based ID isn't reliant on a single identifier, right? So it's not relying upon third-party cookies or just IP addresses or just device IDs. And so that allows us to be really good at being able to find audiences and extend reach to some of these more difficult audiences. Another, I think, interesting way to think about it too is there's also like this segment of audiences that are the opposite, that are really super easy to reach.
Yeah.
Where, their digital exhaust is everywhere. They're always online. The problem there is everyone is trying to reach them because everybody can identify them.
Yeah, right. So it's almost like, it reminds me of the old days they were talking about the heavy TV viewer versus light TV viewer. Like, you would run a big campaign, you're inevitably going to pound that one group over the head. And that's just the same way. You're seeing the same dynamic.
That's exactly right. The whole notion of oversaturation, and that's a problem, right? Because everyone's bidding on those same individuals, also drives the price up. But if you think about from a marketer perspective, how do brands grow? right? Brands grow.
You need new people. Yeah.
Right. Either sell more to the same people, or you need new people, which means you need incremental reach. And so that's the importance of not being stuck with signal loss and being able to make sure that you're not stuck to a smaller and smaller pool.
Right. As cool as it is that brands can go use a clean room and match up their customer base with somebody else's, you don't want to just reach your choir, the people that you're already in your customer base. You got to keep growing that thing.
That's right.
Okay. What about, the industry is constantly evolving, right? They're trying to this effort to have an enhanced ID, but also better protect privacy. It's still uncertain where the new administration is going to come down on all this stuff, but the state laws are there. Are we getting the balance right for customers between the personalization they want, but the not being freaked out factor? Like, how are we doing there?
Yeah. I mean, I love the word balance, because I think that's ultimately what you need, right? I think we can't lose sight of personalization, but we can't do that at the expense of compromising privacy.
Right.
But the problem is if we killed personalization, you can't build relationships. I'll give you an example. And this is not even in the marketer world, right? Yeah. But I moved out, lived in New York City for the last 20 years, moved out to the suburbs 3 years ago.
I'm sorry.
It's been an adjustment. But over the last 3 years, got to know my neighbor really well, right? Spent time together, had some beers, introduced the families. But what if every morning when I saw him, it was like I never had those past conversations. Yes. And I started asking him, how many kids do you have? What do you do for a living? What are their names?
Right.
He'd think I was crazy, right?
Right.
But that's what would happen if we kind of focus only on privacy and we remove personalization in the marketer world. It's the whole concept of like 50 First Dates, if you saw the movie. But I also think that's what consumers, actually, that's not what I think. I know that's what consumers expect. There's a lot of data points that consumers want personalization.
Right.
And so I'll give you like one other example in the marketer's world. I've been a Spotify member since probably, I think, 2019. And if I started seeing Spotify ads that were trying to acquire me as a new member.
Right.
And especially
like, what the hell? What is wrong with you, Spotify? You don't even get me at all. I thought we were
versus
in a relationship.
Versus if Spotify actually knew something about me and knew I've got 2 kids and they're getting older now, we're probably fighting over who can use the Spotify on what device, and trying to upgrade me to a family plan, right? I mean, that's what we should be aspiring to, and that's what personalization allows for. And so it's just around striking that balance. And I mean, at Epsilon, we've always been at the forefront of protecting consumer privacy and the rights to their data, managing opt-outs on an individual level, but it's the balance is key, and you just don't want the pendulum to shift too far one way or the other.
Speaking of the pendulum shifting, there's been a lot of talk the last couple of years about it shifting towards a cohort world versus a deterministic world. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like your people-based identifier is going one way versus the other. But if we have to target people in cohorts more, we have to be more careful. I imagine that personalization might get lost, or there might be some bad assumptions made. What do you think about that whole shift?
I think personalization completely gets lost. You're making assumptions and indexing people and saying, these people behave a certain way. Versus taking the individual identity, the individual information we know about somebody to customize a message to them and start to build a relationship and have conversations across channels. Cohorts to me is a much less effective way of taking a stab at personalization.
Right. Lastly, what are brands asking? I imagine there's a spectrum of those that are really paying attention to all these signal loss challenges and trying to dive into it versus some that have been putting things off or just don't dig that deeply into it. What kind of stuff are they asking you? And what does the range look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's around helping them because I mean, I think every brand is kind of facing the same types of challenges. They've got data. A lot of that data is kind of dirty or in different places, and they're trying to organize it and they're trying to stitch it to an individual. They want to be able to use it for marketing, both paid and owned, and they're trying to tie those things together as well. Because too often, kind of paid and owned have been operated separately.
Yeah.
And so they're talking to their customers in very different ways. And so they're trying to kind of break down these barriers across channels, use their data more effectively to be able to better target, measure, optimize, their media.
I think I have to ask you before I let you go, what is dirty data? That sounds scary.
Dirty data would be incomplete data, data that you're missing information on, right? Maybe you've got an email address, but you're missing a phone number, or maybe there's a digit off. And so this is the reality of databases, right? That they're not as
perfect as you like to believe.
Yeah, exactly right. So they need partners to be able to help them cleanse it and make it usable.
All right, well, Mike, awesome stuff. Lots of fascinating topics to unpack over the coming months and year. But thanks so much for your time here. Let's talk again.
Appreciate the time, Mike. Thanks so much.